The story I have for you today is written by Cynthia Rylant, who also wrote the book we read earlier called When I Was Young in the Mountains. This book is called The Old Woman Who Named Things. And as I said, it's written by Cynthia Rylant and it's illustrated by Catherine Brown. I think you'll enjoy this story. The Old Woman Who Named Things. These illustrations are really awesome. Once there was an old woman who loved to name things. She named the old car she drove Betsy. She named the old chair she sat in Fred. She named the old bed she slept on Roxanne. And she named her old house Franklin. So she's given a name to things that aren't alive. Every morning she would get out of Roxanne, have a cup of cocoa in Fred, lock up Franklin, and drive to the post office in Betsy. She always hoped for a letter from someone, but all she ever got was bills. The reason the old woman never got any letters was because she had outlived every single one of her friends. This worried her. She didn't like the idea of being a lonely old woman without any friends, without anyone that she could call by name. That's kind of sad. All her friends have died, and she's lonely. So she began to name things, but she named only those things she knew she could never outlive. Her car Betsy had more get up and go than anything around. Her chair Fred had never sagged a day in his life. Not one creak or moan had ever come out of her old bed Roxanne. And her house Franklin had been standing for over 100 years and didn't look a day past 20. The old woman never worried about outliving any of these things, and her days were happy. One day, when the old woman was out soaping some mud off Betsy, telling her that Franklin wouldn't want to be seen with a car that didn't keep its bumpers a little cleaner, a shy brown puppy came to the old woman's gate. The old woman had not named the gate because 2 of its hinges had rusted off and she could tell it was not long for this world. The shy brown puppy wagged its tail. It looked a little hungry. The old woman stood beside Betsy and watched the puppy for a while. She said. Then she walked into Franklin, got a chunk of ham from her refrigerator, and came back outside. The old woman gave the ham to the hungry puppy and told it to go home. She told it that Betsy always made puppies sick, and Fred never allowed puppies to sit on him, and Roxanne was not wide enough for a puppy and an old woman, and besides, Franklin couldn't tolerate dog hair. So the puppy went away. But the next day, the puppy was back. The old woman was sitting in Fred, reading a book about everlasting flowers, when she saw the puppy through the window. "Go home," she said to the puppy. The puppy wagged its tail when it saw her. "Go home," she called again, but the puppy just kept wagging. The old woman noticed it still looked a little hungry, so she went to her refrigerator. She gave the puppy a hunk of cheese and 2 biscuits. Then she told it to go home, and the puppy went away. Are you seeing a pattern here? I wonder if the puppy's going to come back. That night, as the old woman plumped up the pillows on Roxanne, she thought about the puppy. It was a very nice puppy, she thought. It was a very pretty puppy, she thought. But it couldn't stay. If it stayed, she would have to give it a name. And it could never last as long as Franklin or Fred or Betsy or Roxanne. She might outlive it. And she didn't want to risk that. She didn't want to outlive any more friends. So she just kept telling it to go home. Every day the shy brown puppy came to the old woman's gate. And every day she fed it and told it to go home. Always it went away and always it came back the next day. This went on for many months. The puppy got bigger and bigger until soon it was not a puppy anymore. It was a dog. And it was still a dog with no name. In all this time, the old woman had gotten a new dresser that she'd named Bill. and a new wheelbarrow that she had named Francine, and a new concrete pig for her garden that she had named Bud. But the dog that she faithfully fed at her gate every day still had no name. Since it had no name, the old woman didn't have to worry about outliving it, and she thought herself pretty clever in this. Then one day, the shy brown puppy did not come to the old woman's house. She sat and fretted and watched the gate all day long, but the puppy never came. And the old woman felt sad. The next day, again, the dog did not come. The old woman drove Betsy around town looking for the dog, but she didn't find it, and the old woman felt even sadder. The following day, when the puppy still had not come, the old woman knew she had to do something. She picked up her telephone and called the dog catcher. "Have you caught any shy brown dogs?" the old woman asked the dog catcher. "We've got a kennel full of shy brown dogs, ma'am," said the dog catcher. "Was yours wearing a collar with its name on it?" "No," said the old woman sadly, and she hung up the phone. The old woman sat and thought. She thought about the shy brown dog that had no collar with a name on it. Wherever it was, no one would know it was supposed to come to her gate every day, and that she was supposed to feed it and tell it to go home, and that things were supposed to be this way. The shy brown dog with no collar and no name, and no one would ever know these things about it. The old woman made a decision. She locked up Franklin and drove Betsy to the dog catcher's kennel. Then she said to the dog catcher, "I've come to find my dog." He asked her what color it was. "It's brown," she said. He asked her how old it was. "About a year old," she said. Then he asked her what its name was. I wonder what she'll do. The old woman thought for a moment. She thought of all the old dear friends with names who she had outlived. She saw their smiling faces and remembered their lovely names, and she thought how lucky she had been to have known these friends. She thought what a lucky old woman she was. "My dog's name is Lucky," she told the dog catcher. He led her to a big yard full of white dogs and black dogs and brown dogs. The old woman looked and looked and looked, and finally she saw her own shy brown dog sitting beside a gate. The dog was looking at Betsy parked in the driveway. I bet the dog is thinking, "I know that car," because dogs remember stuff like that. The old woman called out, "Here, Lucky!" And at the sound of her voice, the shy brown dog came running. From that day on, Lucky lived with the old woman, and he always came when his name was called. It turned out that Betsy didn't make all dogs sick, and Fred was happy to allow a dog to sit on him, and Franklin really didn't mind a little bit of dog hair. And every night, Roxanne was sure to make herself plenty wide enough for a shy brown lucky dog and the woman who had named him. I like this story because I notice how my main character, the old woman, changes throughout the story. At the beginning, she's lonely and she's scared to get too attached to another living thing. So she names her stuff instead. But then as the story goes on, she ends up loving this puppy, and she realizes she's going to bring it home and take care of it, even if it may not outlive her. So she becomes very brave at the end. So that tells me she's a round character. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this story as much as I did. Thank you. Bye.